Jessa's breath hitched, a ragged gasp in the damp air. The concussion hammered behind her eyes, blurring the wreckage of the atmosphere processor control room into a swirling grey mess. Each shallow breath scraped against her throat, tasting of metal and despair. She registered the familiar scent of recycled protein paste, now laced with a sickly sweet, alien undertone that made her stomach churn. "Report," she croaked, the word barely audible above the low hum resonating through the room. Across from her, Thorne stood motionless, his posture eerily relaxed. He hadn't reacted to her obvious pain, hadn't offered assistance. His face was an unsettling mask of serene calm, his usual gruffness absent. It was a posture that bordered on unsettling. "Damage assessment complete," Thorne replied, his voice even, almost musical. "Processor core destabilized. Atmospheric regulation offline." "Casualties?" she pressed, ignoring the clinical detachment in his tone. She had to push past it, needed information, needed to grasp the extent of the disaster. "Minimal," he said, with a lack of emotion that felt deliberately misleading. "Most personnel have relocated to the central plaza." "Relocated? Or?" He didn't answer, his gaze fixed on a point beyond her. Jessa felt a surge of frustration, a desperate need for answers. "Reyes?" she asked, her voice sharper this time. Reyes was her comms officer, her right hand. He was also the one she's entrusted with getting her out of this mess. Thorne's head tilted almost imperceptibly. "Reyes is coordinating relocation efforts." "I want to see him," she insisted, pushing herself to her feet, ignoring the pain that shot through her dislocated shoulder. She had received proper medical attention, not really. The adrenaline had been keeping her going, but she knew that time was running out. "He is occupied," Thorne said, his voice lacking any trace of warmth. "Your presence is not required." "My presence is always required," she snapped, and started toward the damaged access door. She needed to see Reyes, to understand what was happening. He was the only one she could trust. Stepping out into the corridor, she felt a shift in atmosphere. The air grew heavier, thick with a pervasive silence that pressed against her ears. The faint hum resonated more strongly here, a low thrumming that vibrated in her bones. The emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows that danced on the grimy walls. As she reached the central plaza, the scene that greeted her stole the breath from her lungs. The plaza, once a bustling hub of activity, was now dominated by a silent, unsettling tableau. Personnel, dozens of them, stood motionless in neat rows, their faces blank, their eyes unfocused. They were dressed in their standard-issue TCDF uniforms, but the familiar crispness was gone, replaced by a slackness that suggested a profound exhaustion. And at the center of the plaza, bathed in a strange, ethereal glow, stood Reyes. He was no longer the man she knew. His skin had taken on a subtle jade-green hue, his eyes were devoid of their usual spark, and a disturbing calmness permeated his posture. He stood as an extension of the massive, monolithic structure that towered over the plaza, a structure that pulsed with a life of its own. He was speaking, but his voice was different. It was layered, distorted, echoing with an unnatural resonance. It wasn't just his voice. It felt like dozens of voices speaking in unison, chanting a low rhythmic mantra that seemed to burrow into her mind. "Army Unity Ascension." He turned his head slowly, his gaze locking with hers. There was no recognition in his eyes, no trace of the camaraderie they had shared. Only a chilling, empty stare. "Jessa," he said, his voice a corrupted version of the familiar tone. "You are welcome." A wave of nausea washed over her. She stumbled back, clutching at a nearby wall for support. The chanting grew louder, more insistent. She could feel it seeping into her mind, a subtle pressure urging her to join, to surrender. What have you done to him?" she managed to choke out, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Thorne appeared beside her, his expression unchanged. "He has embraced harmony," he said, his voice a soft echo of Reyes' corrupted tone. "He has found his place in the Greater Hall." "The Greater Hall? What are you talking about?" "The transition is inevitable. Resistance is futile." He extended a hand towards Reyes, a subtle gesture of invitation, of reassurance. Jessa knew she was facing something far beyond her comprehension, something that threatened the very fabric of her reality. She was alone, injured and surrounded by enemies, but she refused to surrender. She would fight, not just for her own survival, but for the soul of New Eden, for the memory of the man Reyes used to be. She drew her sidearm, her hand shaking slightly. "Stay back," she warned, her voice firm despite the tremor in her body. "I'm giving you one chance to step away." The chanting intensified. Reyes' eyes remained fixed on hers, empty and devoid of recognition. The monolithic structure pulsed with a renewed intensity, bathing the plaza in an eerie, otherworldly light. And Jessa knew that the fight for New Eden had just begun.